All right, it's 5:30. That's called the October 23rd Alameda County Water District Special Board of Directors meeting to order, please. Roll call.
Director Akbari. Here. Director Gunther.
Here.
Director Sethi. Director Weed.
Here.
Director Huang.
Here. And I believe, Mr. Stevenson, you have some housekeeping remarks?
Sure do. As usual, good evening, everybody. On behalf of the ACWD Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome the public's participation in this special meeting of the ACWD Board. My name is Ed Stevenson, and I serve as the district's general manager. Members of the public may participate in this board meeting in person or remotely by either using the Zoom application or by telephone. Any member of the public participating in person may approach the speaker's podium at the appropriate time. For those participating remotely, note that the meeting agenda and presentation materials are available on the district's website at acwd.org. You may reference the instructions at the top of the agenda for how to participate using the controls in the Zoom app or your dial pad if participating by telephone audio. This hybrid board meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public for future viewing. And President Huang, that completes my housekeeping remarks.
Thank you. Next is salute to the flag. Director Gunther, would you do the honor, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag. United States of America.
The Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next is public comment on matters on this notice of special meeting. Members of the public may address the board on any issue that are listed on the agenda. A 5-minute limit is customary. Members of the public who wish to address the board on a scheduled agenda item will also be given the opportunity to do so when the item is discussed. I do not see any members of the public attending in person, so that's open and online. If any members of the public that's attending remotely, would you please raise your hand in the Zoom app if you wish to address the board? I am not seeing any hands. Then let's move on to the next item, which is Sustainable Groundwater Management Act Update Workshop.
Great. Thank you, President Huang. And for those participating online, just note that there'll be plenty of other opportunities to make comments, ask questions as we go along. For this item, the district has held a series of water resources master planning workshops in calendar years 2024 and 2025, focused on planning for long-term management of the district's water resources in the face of climate change, evolving regulations, declining availability of water supplies, new water supply alternatives, and other factors, using an integrated resources planning approach. This workshop complements this series and will focus on the district's sustainable groundwater management activities. And before we get going, I'll just make a quick note that this is something that we wanted to make sure that we're providing the board with an update on SGMA. It's obviously a critically important part of what we do. The material is a little bit long to try and cram into a regular board meeting, hence the special workshop. And we've got a number of excellent presenters here this evening to share a fair amount of information. Before I turn it over to Ms. Walden to give us a bit of an introduction, did you want to just double check if there are members of the public that want to make some initial public comments?
Yes, please. So, Mr. Abreu, know that you attended. You just walked in. So, if you have any public comments for the board, I'll reopen the public comment.
Thank you. Yeah, I looked at this on the internet and saw the slides. This reminds me of emergency planning. So when doing emergency planning, you don't just look at your own earthquakes. You look at the earthquakes in Japan or wherever else, or Mexico City or wherever they are. And you look at the fires in Pacific Palisades or anywhere else that has fires, and then you do your planning, or in this case, groundwater management. And if you look over here at the current county and you look at the satellites, you see that the ground is subsiding pretty fast. So, and this district is connected to that groundwater basin. So when we do groundwater planning, some amount of groundwater planning, you need to be looking over their shoulders and trying to figure out why, you can, if their groundwater if their water levels keep dropping, the state isn't going to let them get away with that forever. And if the state does, then the laws of physics won't let them pull water out forever. Eventually, something's got to give. And then on groundwater, if you look over here at the Tri-Valley and at that, whatever they call that basin, during the last drought, I heard their managers would get up many times and tell their board, oh, we're pulling this thing really hard. We're pulling it hard. We're pulling it hard, as if they couldn't suck the water out fast enough. And that's a failure of management too, because it's about how much water you have and about how many straws you put in and how many pumps you have. And if you don't have enough straws, enough pumps, or enough water, then you don't have the right system in place. So I think that and also there's the quality. You know, if you have a lot of chemicals that people are using, you know, for their industrial processes, the PFAS or whatever above ground, sooner or later it might show up in below ground. But we already have the filtration in place. So I guess that's so we're doing. We're trying to head that off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abreu. I do not see any other members of the public attending in person. So with that, shall we move on to the workshop?
Yes, that'd be great. And just a quick note to members of the board and to the public, our Director of Water Resources, Ms. Heides, wasn't able to join us this evening. She's home ill, but that's not going to stop us. And so we have our Groundwater Resources Division Manager, Michelle Walden, pulling double duty this evening, not only as our groundwater manager, but also as our department head in water resources. So with that, Ms. Walden, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Tonight's team of presenters are engineers and hydrogeologists within the Groundwater Resources Division that have over 60 years of combined working experience specific to the district's management of the Niles Cone. I'll be the first presenter tonight and will cover the workshop introduction and goals, a review of SGMA, or the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Ms. Ava Laser, who is a hydrogeologist, will then provide updates on work being done regarding the district's alternative to a groundwater sustainability plan, or alternative. Then I'll discuss the Department of Water Resources comments and recommended actions from our most recent alternative update submittal, which was in 2021. Mr. Michael Hallowell, who's our senior engineer, will discuss SGMA and groundwater modeling efforts and how that ties into responding to DWR's recommended actions. Then finally, I'll wrap up the presentation with some information on how the Water Resources Master Plan ties into the district's SGMA efforts and the next steps. Next slide. So the past few years, as Mr. Stevenson said, there have been a number of board workshops that focused on a number of water resources and planning related topics, including forecasting customer water demands, as well as the district's Water Resources Master Plan. Today's workshop is focused on the district's current and upcoming efforts related to SGMA and the continued sustainable management of the Niles Cone Groundwater Basin, or Niles Cone. These activities continue to support the district's strategic plan goals number 1 and 2 that are identified on this slide. Next slide. So in the groundwater industry, there are a number of acronyms, some of which are on these slides, some of which we'll probably say inadvertently because it's second nature to us. So we thought it would be good to provide some acronyms for everybody to follow along. Next slide. Tonight's workshop goals are to share progress on the district's alternative to a groundwater sustainability plan, provide an opportunity for the public to participate in that discussion of the district's groundwater management, and share the latest activities and the next steps. Next slide. So I'll start us off with a Sustainable Groundwater Management Act refresher. Not sure how quick it'll really be. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA, was enacted in 2014 and changed how groundwater is managed throughout the state. The purpose of SGMA was to provide for the formation of groundwater sustainability agencies and for groundwater basins to be sustainably managed through either the submittal of an alternative to a groundwater sustainability plan or a groundwater sustainability plan. A number of agencies, such as ACWD or the district, were managing their respective groundwater basins long before SGMA was enacted. In 2016, the district submitted an alternative to a groundwater sustainability plan, or more simply referred to as an alternative, as it preserves and continues the district's successful sustainable groundwater management already being performed under pre-existing legal authority, programs, and policies. The graphic on the right by DWR shows how the core SGMA agencies and stakeholders, including beneficial users of groundwater, interrelate. Next slide. This interrelationship between agencies and the public is nothing new for the district, as we have a long history of working cooperatively with other agencies, organizations, and stakeholders in the Niles Cone, as well as with adjacent subbasins. The district is committed to being a transparent organization and engaging with the community it serves, which includes groundwater education and outreach and ensuring water supply reliability by sustainably managing the Niles Cone. Next slide. Before I get into the particulars of SGMA, it's important to have a quick refresher on what's been done and what's next. This slide highlights the timeline of the alternative and alternative update submittals through 2026. Every 5 years, the district must submit an alternative update for reevaluation by DWR. The first alternative update was submitted in December of 2021. The district's alternative update identified a few improvements that could be made, and in DWR's approval, they also included recommended actions that they believed would enhance the following alternative 5-year update, which is due in December of 2026. Next slide. So what does SGMA do? The next 2 slides have graphics from the Department of Water Resources and present some general SGMA information. At the bottom of the pyramid, I'm going to grab my pointer here. I'm going to point to the bottom. Are the 6 undesirable results identified in SGMA when it comes to groundwater management. DWR created this pyramid to demonstrate that if a groundwater basin is being managed to avoid undesirable results that are significant and unreasonable, then other items in the pyramid should be addressed. For example, absence of undesirable results, then it's likely a basin is operating within their sustainable yield, demonstrating existing sustainable groundwater management, or at least on the path to sustainable management, where ultimately the sustainability goal has been achieved. Next slide. So what are the 6 undesirable results? As defined in SGMA, it's chronic lowering of groundwater levels, indicating a significant and unreasonable depletion of supply if continued over the planning and implementation horizon. So SGMA has a planning horizon through 2040 for alternative groundwater sustainability plans and 2042 for groundwater sustainability plans. But they also want the planning to exceed beyond that, so they look at year 2050 and 2070 as well. So another undesirable result, is significant and unreasonable reduction of groundwater storage. There's also seawater intrusion. Water quality degradation, including the migration of contaminant plumes that impair water supplies, land subsidence that substantially interfere with surface land uses, and depletion of interconnected surface water that have adverse impacts on the beneficial uses of that surface water. So the 6 items on the slide are more commonly referred to as sustainability indicators, which I think I've already accidentally said. So next slide, please. So this is a map of the Niles Cone, and the district's groundwater service area and the statutory boundary and the DWR Bulletin Niles Cone boundary is on this map. It's the blue line. And the Hayward Fault is thank you, JR. The Hayward Fault is the black dashed line, which impedes the westward flow of groundwater as evidenced by the large differences in water levels on either side of the fault. As a result, a more simplistic 2-region subbasin or management area convention is used by the district for everyday operations and management. The subbasins are more commonly referred to as the above Hayward Fault, or AHF, and that's on the eastern side of the basin, and then the below Hayward Fault, or BHF, which is on the western side. Next slide. So the district's alternative identifies which potential undesirable results may apply to each subbasin or management area. The potential undesirable result for the above Hayward Fault is lowering of groundwater levels, but it's in terms of a possible declining well yield for a private well. Then seawater intrusion is the potential undesirable result in the below Hayward Fault Basin. However, maintaining groundwater levels and sufficient storage so that groundwater levels are high enough to prevent new seawater intrusion precludes other potential undesirable results. You'll notice in this figure that the water quality degradation is no, and it's in blue. However, I'll discuss this a bit more in detail in a future slide. Next slide. So how do we currently avoid undesirable results? This is accomplished through sustainability indicators and the use of minimum thresholds that are shown on the slide. Maintaining groundwater elevations higher than the thresholds will avoid those undesirable results. To put simply, add enough recharge and don't overpump. Next slide. Which then ties into the district's existing groundwater level operating conditions. The operation levels are a tool to ensure adequate supply and operational sustainability. A short-term level of -5 feet mean sea level at the below Hayward Fault indicator well is the expected worst case for a multi-year critical drought. It's important to note that in Sigma, overdraft during a period of drought is not sufficient to establish a chronic lowering of groundwater levels if extractions and recharge are managed to ensure that reductions in groundwater levels during a period of drought are offset by increases in groundwater levels during other periods. Any future changes to the district's groundwater level operating conditions must be fully evaluated for all 6 sustainability indicators to determine if there's potential undesirable results. Next slide. As I mentioned before, I wanted to discuss the water quality degradation potential undesirable results. Since 2020, the district is providing information on per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, in our Sigma annual reports and in our last 5-year periodic evaluation. It's important to note that Sigma specifically looks for degraded water quality issues that result from the management of the basin, not just its presence. Not all water quality impacts to groundwater must be addressed. Sigma's key objective is to ensure the management of the basin will not significantly and unreasonably degrade water quality, limit water supplies, and the beneficial uses of groundwater. We've gathered a lot of PFAS information through monitoring and characterization, and we are coordinating with the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Quality Control Board's PFAS team and keeping apprised of state and federal regulations as well as other local agency actions as it relates to the presence of PFAS. Next slide. To wrap up this Sigma refresher, we're now entering a new era phase in Sigma where it's cyclical as far as our alternative updates. The district's alternative updates are not a plan amendment, but are written assessments that describe and provide an update on ACWD's groundwater management efforts, an explanation of how the alternative update is functionally equivalent to the elements of a groundwater sustainability plan. It incorporates DWR's recommended actions and includes information on our own recommendations or proposed projects and next steps to ensure the continued sustainable management of the Niles Cone. So you can see it kind of, we'll submit a 5-year update, DWR will review, approve, give us recommendations, we'll have our own recommendations, and then it keeps going. So before I move on to the next presenter, I'd like to open it up to any potential questions.
Questions or comments from the board?
A question. Water quality degradation. I saw nitrates in there. But I don't recall in any discussion of contaminants in the groundwater basins, such as MTBE or other issues that we've had to address that have shown up in the Sigma reports.
So through our production wells, we do sample for a lot more constituents. For nitrates, we do sample specific monitoring wells in the basin. We do not have any exceedances of it above the MCLs. And so they were previously above MCLs before Sigma. But now we just monitor them just to make sure nothing's changing. And so, hopefully that answers your question as to why nitrates is in there.
So, and next, is there an understanding that in order to prevent what they call the bathtub ring effect, you want to operate your groundwater basin in such a way that you draw it down and recharge it, so it's not a static level in the underground. You want to see the fluctuation.
I mean, we want to exercise our wells so they don't get stagnant and don't work.
Oh, well, that it has um, there's some people would argue that you want static water, you don't want to pump the ground, but we really don't. And historically, you want to raise and lower it. That issue came up in the Tri-Valley area, it was Zone 7, where they did not want to exercise a groundwater reservoir for whatever reason, but it had a net negative effect on the quality of their groundwater operations.
If you're going to talk, you have to get that mic.
Mr. Hollowell, I believe you have answers.
There is flow through the basin, you know, even if there weren't change in levels, which there are change in levels. But there is flow through the Newark aquifer. There's cycling through the other, you know, the Seminole Fremont aquifer. The deep aquifer is not as used as much. But inevitably there is turnover there. I'm not aware of the type of problem here that you're referring to. It's very interesting though.
And one final note that one of the reasons we exist as a district is because of the efforts of water interests to the north of us in trying to overdraft the Niles Cone. Thank you.
All right, so I do not see any members of the public in person, so let's open it up for question from our online attendees. If you have questions or comments, please raise your hand in the Zoom app. I'm not seeing any,
Okay,
so.
great.
move
So
on.
next, I believe, is Miss Ava Laser.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Walden. I'll be sharing with the board some of the progress the district has made since submitting our alternative update in December of 2021. Next slide, please. Let's start with basin conditions. As the board is aware, staff closely monitors the health of the basin through frequent monitoring at our groundwater monitoring wells. And these data are reported as part of our annual groundwater monitoring reports, as well as our annual survey report on groundwater conditions. We monitor groundwater levels at our two key indicator wells weekly for the AHF and the BHF subbasins, respectively. On the slide here, you can see the weekly groundwater level elevations for those two indicator wells from 1990 to 2024, along with the corresponding minimum thresholds for the AHF and BHF that were established as part of our Sigma alternative. As you can see, we have operated the basin above the minimum thresholds over this period. Now, we have completed plenty of other groundwater management activities since late 2021, but maintaining groundwater levels above minimum thresholds is the primary way the district prevents several of the undesirable results identified under Sigma, including seawater intrusion and chronic lowering of groundwater levels. Next slide, please. In March of 2023, the district submitted its Climate Adaptation Plan, or CAP. This initial phase of work involved evaluating the district's vulnerabilities and risks to climate change. And that vulnerability assessment provides a foundation for developing adaptation strategies. Potential future climate conditions affecting sustainable groundwater management include the threat of sea level rise, which could make our basin more sensitive to seawater intrusion. Future phases of work stemming from the CAP will focus on planning and implementing those strategies to ensure our resilience against climate impacts and continued sustainable groundwater management. This work will include groundwater quality monitoring to simulate basin responses to potential future climate conditions like sea level rise. Next slide, please. Okay, other progress since the alternative update. The board may recall implementation of the Niles Cone Groundwater Basin well site evaluation project. And this project evaluated the feasibility of installing and operating a new brackish groundwater extraction well to remove trapped brackish water from the Fremont aquifer. Field work for this pilot study was completed in the spring of 2022. And after evaluating the data collected, staff determined that Site 3 would likely be successful, leading to the brackish groundwater reclamation project, which is the implementation project. Next slide, please. So here's how the well site evaluation project, which was the pilot or feasibility project, interfaces with the brackish groundwater reclamation project, which is the implementation project. As you can see, some of the activities for both projects happen concurrently. And after evaluating the data and determining that Site 3 was promising, district staff submitted a grant application with the state board for the implementation project, and it was awarded. Moving towards implementation of that brackish groundwater reclamation project marks a significant step in our efforts towards basin reclamation from legacy saltwater intrusion, and it meets the objectives of SGMA. Next slide, please. Okay, here we have water quality data from fall of 2024, showing how we've been successful in the Newark aquifer on the left at pushing brackish groundwater back towards the bay. But within the Centerville-Fremont aquifer, shown in the middle, the area marked with a red arrow shows a region of relatively elevated chlorides that are trapped in the more inland portion of the basin. This is the area that the brackish groundwater reclamation project is targeting. Next slide, please. So this implementation project aims to accomplish a few objectives. By installing a new extraction well in the area that we just saw, the district aims to, 1, prevent the spread of saltwater intrusion from reaching the Mowry well field, and also it prevents some water quality related pumping restrictions that may arise from that. Number 2, continue good basin management practices by reclaiming the basin from legacy saltwater intrusion. And 3, reclaim storage in the basin for fresh water instead. So the scope of the brackish groundwater reclamation project is to install a new groundwater extraction well at Site 3. Initially, the pumped water will be discharged to the adjacent flood control channel, but as part of a future project phase, we would hope to connect that water to desal and treat it for use as a supplemental source of supply. Upcoming project work includes planning activities, CEQA and permitting, property acquisition, and eventually system installation. Next slide, please. Okay, finally, we have another project level initiative that has recently moved towards the implementation phase. In our last alternative update, district staff identified areas of the basin with data gaps in characterization, particularly in the southern AHF and BHF areas. The Alternative Data Gap Project aims to address these data gaps by drilling pilot boreholes and installing test and monitoring wells to evaluate hydrogeologic conditions at several sites shown here, located again in areas lacking hydrogeologic data. The project also ties into evaluating the storage and potentially the production capacity of the Southern Niles Cone as part of our Water Resources Master Plan. Those are just a few of the notable accomplishments since our last alternative update, and I'll pause here for questions.
Questions or comments from our member of the public attending in person? No? How about from online? Any questions or comments from online? If you wish, you have questions or comments, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing. Moving on to the board.
I'll raise one.
Director Wee?
There was a time when we talked about the ability to draw down, to draw down the groundwater basin within the area around the well fields to below sea level, because we could sustain that without the risk of groundwater intrusion. Now, under SGMA, we have agreed to certain elevations. Have we agreed not to draw it down below, not to do that? And it removes that capability for a drought response?
I could take that if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, I believe that the potential for drawing the basin down below current minimum thresholds on a temporary basis is an initiative that's being considered as part of a future evaluation. And if it were found that it wouldn't cause us to unsustainable or undesirable results, I believe we could potentially make changes to the minimum thresholds that we've set. But that's an active area of study that we're looking forward to.
Do we need regulatory approval to do that, or have we, because have we established certain levels, and if we were to go below those levels, even though we could argue that it was not going to give a risk of seawater intrusion, because it's far enough away from the coast or the bay.
Mhm.
Does that require going through the regulatory process? Or can we do it on our own?
I think, oh, would you like?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that.
Okay.
Miss Lee, I know.
Sorry, I
The
can't
glasses
see.
on. I'm the same, glasses on, glasses off. As far as regulatory approval, DWR did approve our alternative, and that would be a change. And so, yes, they would review it. However, just like many of the groundwater sustainability agencies in the central part of the basin where there's unavoidable, undesirable results, there's ways to mitigate it. So it depends on what the results would be. So for example, let's say that there was a well and it did not have any chloride in it. And we took the basin to a level that all of a sudden that well was impacted and that was their only drinking water source. There would have to be some sort of mitigation. That's what all the state agencies are leaning into.
But our regulatory approval from DWR and Sigma establishes a fixed level. If we were to draw below that level.
If it was
we would
temporary and we
require
rebound,
approval, even if we know there'll be no degradation to the groundwater basin.
we can definitely change it. If, let's say, there is a 7-year drought and we go beyond that -5 feet because we need to provide potable water supply to our customers. We would be communicating with DWR well in advance of any exceedances. And as long as we're able to rebound the basin, which we've demonstrated over and over again, I'm sure they would be probably okay with it.
That's a rational argument, but it's still, but the real question is, do we need regulatory approval?
Yeah.
Which is not always rational.
Okay.
Yeah, and updates to our alternative plan, which are submitted every 5 years, we can always propose if evaluation demonstrates that we won't go into unsustainable territory, we can always propose new.
We'll
minimum
maintain that as an written in alternative that's accepted as part of our plan, that we have the ability, we've shown that we can do that. But rather than sign off on a certain level and then say, well, we can adjust it later, I encourage you to have the right in the flexibility now.
Mhm.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments from the directors? Director Gunther, you're thinking?
Yeah. I'll let staff ponder that. I'm not so certain we want to write something like that in, and that it could be making us a target versus going back later and saying, here's what we had to do.
So,
Because if we put it in there, we're opening it up for them to say no.
Well, right now, they can say no.
Well, sure they can. But if we try to put it in there, then they could say, no, you're not going to put it in there.
We could,
Then we're targeted.
wait, so let's take a step back. I think as Ms. Walden has said earlier, right, we are studying the potential and the effect, right? It is not, we're proposing to do this because we want to do this. I think there is an effort trying to quantify to see if the basin itself could actually afford to have itself being drawn down to that level. So they are doing the work and they will have the data to back it up if we ever go seek that approval.
the challenge with approvals, as we learned on rubber dam number 3, 10 months before they'd even look at it and allow us to take care of the debris that had landed on top of it. Took 4 hours to remove the debris, but it took 10 months to get the simple approval. So my suggestion is that if we can identify a potential issue in the future, that we write into our plan that we have the flexibility to address, to potentially go below that arbitrary level if we show that there's no damage to the district, to the water basin. And that strikes me just a sound management principle, that if you can avoid regulatory review and approvals, do it. Better.
Thank you for your comment. And I think staff is doing the work to show if there will be any damage. That is a study that's being conducted. So any other comments from the directors?
One more.
No.
On the issue of artesian conditions. We've had artesian conditions in the past. We occasionally see them as we start replenishing the groundwater basin. And with sea level rise, we may well see more. Have we looked at the risk of artesian and people build a home and find they had a well underneath their foundation that suddenly sprouting water? It becomes a real challenge. So we've addressed that, I think, fairly effectively, but there's still a lot of wells out there who are unregulated. What do we have? Is there any approach that we do, or do we have a process in place to address artesian conditions as they should appear?
So I'll go ahead and take that as I'm putting on my former well ordinance supervisor hat on now. I'm gonna wear three different job titles tonight. So we do have our well destruction program. Through the ordinance, we have a lot of ways that we communicate, even when there's new development going on, where we're always looking for those abandoned water wells. We've destroyed a lot of them. It is getting more and more rare that when water levels are high, like after the 2023 storms, we all know the basin got really full. It was wonderful. And so I want to say, you know, historically about 1 or 2 wells that maybe we didn't know about would pop up and we would help that property owner. After the 2023 storms, we did not get any, because we will get a call because they'll think it's their water main that is leaking or something. And so we do have a program to help property owners in order to make sure that they're protected if that does happen. We do monitor, we do still have some artesian conditions towards the bay, and we do model and look at groundwater levels consistently. So as we're looking at climate change with the flashier floods and everything else that is anticipated, we'll be looking at water levels overall in the basin and see how the Newark Aquifer in particular, because that's the most shallowest regional aquifer, will react to that. So we are always looking.
As the groundwater basin becomes more and more shallow, I could foresee in the future a water extraction program. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no more questions from the board. Moving on.
Okay, next slide, JR, please. So Mike, it's actually me.
See if I can
Mr. Hallowell.
read my slides with my long distance glasses here.
Mr. Hallowell, it's actually me.
Okay, go ahead.
You get a break. Okay, so I'm gonna give a little high flyover over DWR's recommended actions. Go ahead, JR. Next slide. So once again, as a reminder, we're in this 5-year update cycle. So it's basically spit our 5-year update in 2021. DWR approved and provided recommendations in 2024, and we're working on our next 5-year update that's due in December 2026. Next slide. So this slide is a summary of DWR's 5 recommendations that we received. And in addition to DWR wanting the alternative to look even more like a GSP style document than we already had done, they've also asked for additional metrics to track the sustainability of the basin through the data that we collect. Groundwater staff is still reviewing and discussing methods to address DWR's recommendations, which leads to the next slide. To characterize the comments a bit more, some are to incorporate guidance documents that DWR actually published after our last submittal. Some are looking to provide consistency between basins with shared boundaries, so we weren't the only ones got similar comments. As well as there's some that need a discussion with the Department of Water Resources to make sure we're aligned on the approach. Finally, there are a few that require more extensive work, such as groundwater modeling of sea level rise, but the key there is to demonstrate progress. So with that being said, I'll stop here to ask any questions about the recommended actions before Mr. Hallowell discusses how the groundwater modeling is informing our SIGMA efforts.
Questions or comments from the board on the slides presented? Not seeing any questions or comments from our one member of the public in attendance? No. How about questions or comments from online? If you have questions or comments, please raise your hand in the Zoom app, please. Not seeing any hand, moving on.
Okay, great. Next up is Mr. Michael Hallowell, who will talk about Sigma and our groundwater modeling.
Okay, we can just get to the next slide. To avoid undesirable effects, results, Sigma really wants groundwater sustainability agencies to have means to quantitatively predict piezometric head and amounts of flows entering and leaving their groundwater basins in response to expected future pumping, rainfall, sea level rise, and other stresses. Not just to predict gross water in and gross water out, but to quantify by individual flow category. Next slide, please. Why does such granularity matter? DWR sees that undesirable results can be localized as well as regional and may be manifested in various ways within a groundwater basin. Next slide, please. Since 1991, ACWD has been modeling groundwater in the Niles Cone with sophisticated, high-resolution, finite element numerical groundwater modeling platforms. Our current model, called NEBIM, runs on the DWR platform called IWFM, which incorporates land, surface water, and root zone processes along with the groundwater functionalities, rendering it particularly well suited to basin management and dealing with Sigma. It simulates conditions daily and outputs piezometric heads and amounts of flow for each of these categories that you see here in the slide. Sources are shown generally on the left, and sinks, meaning pathways by which water leaves the basin, are toward the right. But some of these can be both sources and sinks depending on geographic location, depth, and conditions in the groundwater basin. For example, the Alameda Creek flood control channel, depicted in yellow here, may lose some of its water to groundwater in some locations, but gain from groundwater in other locations, depending on time of the year. Next slide, please. This slide demonstrates another way of classifying these flow categories. What are sources versus sinks, and what are measured versus model calculated. Quarry lakes recharge and pumping are measured and therefore can be pre-estimated, and therefore they're directly entered in the model's input files as stresses. But otherwise, the groundwater budget is comprised of flows that can't be directly measured or pre-estimated, so they must be calculated by the model. Model simulated flows do carry uncertainty because even with sophisticated equations that calculate, say, the fraction of rainfall that percolates to groundwater, the model uses a myriad of parameter values to represent soil properties in those equations. And many of those values themselves, of course, are not measured directly, right? And so assignment of such values, therefore, largely involves a setup process in which the model simulates, or the modeler simulates a selected historical period back in time, and values of soil properties are adjusted in the model rerun until model output piezometric heads reasonably agree with actual records or actual levels recorded in our monitoring wells, like what our technicians do, like all the time. After this is achieved, the model is said to be calibrated and thus ready to evaluate what-if scenarios for future planning. That is to predict responses in the basin to expected future stresses. The reliability of a model increases when the number of parameters assigned through calibration can be minimized, or if calibrated parameters are not all simultaneously dominant through the calibration period. A way to increase confidence in a model is to assign soil property values based on a greater amount of a greater expanded knowledge base, greater amount of characterization, that is geologic exploration, water levels from new monitoring wells where we have data gaps, and focus studies such as pump tests and creek infiltration studies. In so doing, the modeler can replace loosely calibrated values with ones more likely to resemble reality. One important flow pathway whose simulation we expect to improve upon this year is surface water groundwater exchange within the Alameda Creek flood control channel again depicted in yellow. As you know, since the last Sigma update, we've devoted substantial resources to evaluating the proposed low flow channel in the larger Alameda Creek Flood Control Channel in collaboration with the Alameda County Flood Control District. This work has featured a high-resolution model whose development is being aided by a recent creek infiltration study, as well as logs of numerous borings advanced long ago near the channel by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and others. This effort will not only help evaluate the proposed low-flow channel, but also improve our larger basin flow model, NEBIM. Next slide, please. As such, we'll be in a better position to address DWR's recommendations for our next Sigma update, including quantifying groundwater, surface water exchanges with interconnected surface water as part of an improved groundwater budget, and relating groundwater levels to storage as a possible additional measurable threshold. This current work will also support future work, such as development of a solute transport model. A solute transport model would enable us to evaluate future stresses in terms of not just groundwater levels or flows, but also changes in concentration of constituents of interest, such as chloride and other constituents as well in groundwater throughout the basin. Thank you. Want me to stay for questions? Okay.
All right, questions or comments from the board?
In your modeling, which water quality issues, if any, are you modeling?
We are, we don't have a real, well, we have modeled chloride in the past, okay? However, we're aiming now to continue chloride, but also, you know, this particular, if we were to do chloride modeling, and this is still something that's still in the kind of the pre-planning stage here, you know, we'd be considering other types of constituents, whatever the interests of critical ones that they may be deemed possible at that time. So I don't know if we want to discuss or get into that, but definitely there could be other things. So chloride itself, you know, solute transport models are mostly, they start out as flow models. So if we get the flow pathways all correct, we would start with chloride probably as a tracer, you know, to calibrate. And that way we get, you know, diffusion coefficients, we get, we narrow down and determine the hydraulic conductivity of perhaps some of these flow pathways, like the main axes of deposition. And then from there, okay, we should be able to model pretty much any, what we call conservative substance that doesn't, say, interact with soil or degrade or transform in some way. Like, for example, you could take nitrate if you assume it's already mineralized and it's as a conservative substance, and probably try to use it for that. As far as something else like, you know, another type of constituent such as, say, PFAS, then maybe particularly it might be very difficult to do that. It's got interesting properties to it, but certainly it's, you know, it could be probably applied to pretty much anything, with the difference being that one may have to deal with adsorption and transformation, degradation, things like that, which is an extra add-on. So you could start with a chloride model, and then you could take it to the next level and assign different types of coefficients that deal with the behavior of that substance particularly. So, you know, as far as what we'd start with would probably be salt water, probably be seawater intrusion, because we're talking about maybe going, like, say, taking it down 5 feet below sea level, maybe more. A chloride model would be what you would be looking for evaluating, okay, how does that affect, you know, the Newark aquifer, the plume in the Newark aquifer, the Semble Fremont, and so forth. So
You spent a lot of money on fluorocarbons, PFAS. When class, only handful are actionable, but there's 10 to 15,000 potential component,
yeah,
various combinations out there.
right.
Would that be something you'd want to eventually model?
Well, you know, it's certainly a possibility, and maybe with something like that, when you have a lot of different sort of constituents that have behaviors, you take the one you kind of maybe bundle them up, or you might take the one that's most resembles conservative behavior. And because you could spend a lot of time with it. And so there are ways of simplifying it somewhat, but certainly any one of these things is possible. You know, it's just getting it set up.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? I'm not seeing any questions or comments from our member of the public that's attending in person. Seeing none, how about online? For our online attendees, if you have any questions or comments or wish to address the board, please raise your hand in the Zoom app. Not seeing any, so moving on.
Great, thank you. Right, next slide, please. All right, so what are the next steps? So as I mentioned in the beginning, we were going to talk about how the Water Resources Master Plan folds into our Sigma effort. So this is a slide that we've used before when it shows like the different deadlines and everything that we do Sigma related. And basically I created a "We Are Here" arrow for the Water Resources Master Plan. We have another workshop planned November 20th to continue the discussion for the portfolios on that. And so the idea is that, you know, our next 5-year update is due next December. So basically the goal is to maintain the current groundwater operational criteria. However, there are projects that are groundwater related that are being proposed through the Water Resources Master Plan that will require technical evaluation to see how they impact the basin or don't impact the basin. Next slide, please. So most of those groundwater projects currently proposed will require the modeling, as I mentioned, if they trigger any undesirable results. So how the projects may or may not affect water levels and how that affects our chloride and total dissolved solids, as well as the possible movement of PFAS in the basin. So Director Weed, this gets to your question. So basically the idea is to determine if those planned phase projects will trigger any undesirable results. Next slide. So what's next? Basically, the near term is to continue implementing our alternative, continue our stakeholder outreach as well as coordination with adjacent basins. There's no expected changes to how we operate the basin in this next 5-year periodic evaluation while we're evaluating the Water Resources Master Plan projects. Our next annual Sigma report is due in April, and we anticipate releasing the public draft of the alternative update in October of 2026 as it's due to DWR in December of 2026. Next slide. So that's really all we have today to present on, or tonight. I do want to thank the whole groundwater resources team, even though they're not here. It takes an army to do all the work that we do, including all the wonderful data to back up the slides that we presented. And so I just want to give them all a shout out.
Thank you. Question, Director Weed?
Just a comment. I would encourage us when we talk about plans that we follow a convention which puts a year on the plan. We now are doing a 2050 plan for our groundwater policy. In the past was IRP, but it's 2050. The Bay Delta plan is 2035. And it's been that since they started with the first plan in 2013. It allows them to ignore the inconvenient truth of sea level rise. For sea level rise for ACWD, what do we currently have in our plans and what is our target level?
So that'll be addressed as we get our solute transport model. So right now we've already looked at using the previous model and know that we can go to -5 feet without having any negative impacts to the basin as long as it's short term. And we have projected out water levels out to 2050 and 2070 to see if there are any exceedances of those minimum thresholds. And currently, with the current demand and the current projections that are getting redeveloped, by the way, through the Water Resources Master Plan, there aren't any exceedances.
Well, the Bay Delta, the Delta conveyance for the tunnel in Sequa identified a 10.2 foot sea level rise at the Golden Gate, the life of the project. At 10 feet, that -5 becomes -15 feet. So hopefully we can take a look at that. FEMA has been a bit lax and slow in adjusting the sea level criteria for the bay. And currently at 11, there's talk about at least going to 14. So the key question is, what numbers will we be using or are we using?
I know we had climate change factors. Mike, do you want, or Ava? Thanks.
Yeah, like Ms. Walden mentioned, we modeled 2030 and 2070 in 3 different scenarios for 2070. And with those, we had different change factors applied to precipitation and evapotranspiration, but we also assumed sea level rise. And we used numbers from the California Ocean Protection Council. There was moderate to high severity, you know, there were certain guidelines. So within the Bay Area, so we had a level of sea level rise that was assumed for 2030, but also for 2070, which was much higher.
Do you happen to know what those numbers are?
Off the top of my head, no, it was 3 something and 6 something maybe.
Thank you.
You sure?
We'll get back to you with that. And thank you, Ms. Laser, for correcting the 2050. I kept saying 2050. It's 2030 and 2070.
All right.
Okay. One of the challenges you have, one of our local cities is relying on FEMA criteria, which I think is currently at 11 feet. And assuming that until FEMA changes the numbers, they're going to stay with what the current FEMA levels are.
Thank you, Director Wee. Any other questions or comments from the directors?
I've been stewing over here about Director Weed's question of artesian effect. And actually in his corner with this, and I see an issue. Now, if we are the groundwater group, as we are, the experts, and we are the experts, by the way, far more probably than just about anybody else. Now, I'm not an expert, but I have some ideas. You're not crazy. Some people might think they are. But if sea level rise is doing what it's doing, and we're building where we are building, i.e. almost in the marshlands of Newark, Hayward, Union City, up against areas that, you know, okay, you put a barrier there, okay, great, you put a dike. I haven't been an ocean engineer for a long time, a degree. They don't work. They're not going to hold back the ocean, let alone hold back the bay. Biggest concern I have is artesian effect, in that if you've got water sitting outside of these locations, it's 10 feet higher, 5 feet higher. What's the impact going to be on the effect in those outlying communities? And my concern is, who are they going to come to? They're not going to the city. They're not going to be going to the state. And if they do go to the state, guess who they're going to come to? This is something I think we ought to start preparing for. Artesian effects due to sea level rise. I don't know, I'm not that into the subject, but I kind of get the feeling they're being left out. We're so used to groundwater levels going down because we're sucking the groundwater down. Nobody's looking at the fact that if you continue to rise the bay, those groundwater levels aren't next to the bay, i.e. us, maybe Pleasanton. If you look at our old map in the hallway, 1873, that map's pretty accurate, and it shows swamp in a lot of places. And guess what's in those swamps today? It's all developed. In some places, we're still building out there, not just here, but Pleasanton. Since I've lived here, I've watched farmland become houses. And if you go into our map, those are swamps. You keep rising the bay with sea level rise. I'm not as concerned about the chloride. I am concerned about the chloride levels and what that's going to do to our groundwater. But what else is it going to do? And where are our groundwater levels going to go? The other thing we need to really look at and I think at some point, we're gonna get told we're gonna look at it, is how are we gonna address that? I don't think Sigma was developed to study this or address this. And it's not a problem yet. Probably won't be a problem for me. But I see it coming. And who are they gonna dump this on? The agencies. Groundwater agencies, because they're gonna be the pros from Dover. Who else are you gonna do it with? Who else are you gonna look to? We look at us. So Director Weed's comments are actually very well taken. But we have to be careful in that not only do we have to look at, when these things start to artesian, people are gonna be coming to us saying, hey, what are you guys gonna do about this? I got a spring in my backyard. Surprise. Yeah. Let me go look at my map for a minute. You know, your backyard is a swamp. Oh, you didn't look at that map. Your developer didn't tell you about that map. Just throwing it out there. I had to say it tonight because I am concerned about that. I really don't have any idea what the effect is going to be. I just know something. There's going to be an effect. Has to be. Will it cause backed up water through the sewer systems? I think so. Are we going to have to install pumps to pump this stuff back out to the bay? Well, that's good. Maybe we can build a couple of desal plants, make some more water. That may be what we have to do. Just to keep the water out of our houses. So, just throwing it out there.
Okay.
I
Director
encourage
Weed?
you to visit Alviso. Where some of the more recent housing developments are the similar design that you might find on the outer banks of the Atlantic Ocean. But the houses are being built on stilts. They're putting parking underneath the residential units. So that is one development concept. And we once heard of Newark by the Bay when it was suggested that the term should be Newark in the Bay. They dropped the term and the slogan Newark by the Bay.
No comment on that. Any other questions or comments from Director? If not, I'll open up to our member of the public.
And I'll leave one more final thing, that when they had the last tidal tide warning, Interstate 880 was the
Cut off.
line for which the tidal waves were used as the warning line. The entire city of Newark was in the tidal warning zone, tidal wave warning zone.
Yes, I know. I got a warning. So for Mr. Abreu, do you have any questions or comments for the board?
Yeah, with the idea that the water level is rising, I think their latest plan, they are going to build, Newark has got some hearings coming up in a month or two for their Bayside development or in the Bay development. And they want to put like, what is it, about 6 or 15 feet of dirt. And then, of course, so every house will be an island, but in between the islands, you still have to run pipes and sewers and roads and whatever. So eventually you're not going to fill up everything everywhere. So you will have rising sea level. And then as for the legal thing, so this is the waters coming up in other areas around here. The hillsides are sliding down, or there was fear of hillsides sliding down. So what the city did was send them a letter every year and tell them that they are in this zone. And when there's some damage, the city is not responsible, and just designate the liability for them, because the city doesn't, just want once a year and point the finger and say, okay, it's your problem. So maybe if the agencies want to do that, use the same trick to do it back at some city. If the city builds houses in a dangerous location, start sending them letters every year. And start with the developer before they build it, and then send it to the homeowners. I think this city idea is a really good idea. It's very clever. This is what happens when you have a lot of lawyers and not a lot of engineers.
Thank you, Mr. Abreu.
That's, first of all, there was a comment made that our competition with China, where China is governed by engineers and the United States is governed by lawyers. So it's two different ways of looking at things. But the enabling legislation for BCDC, the Bay Conservation Development, it required that they come up with a 100-foot ring around the bay, which would be their area, which establishes the shoreline. The city of Fremont refused to play, so for Alameda County, the BCDC shoreline designation goes from the southern boundary of Union City to Emeryville. There's a gap. By default, it'll probably be the Union Pacific Railroad easement, and railroad tracks will become our de facto shoreline. But hopefully they'll be able to start looking at it. We haven't, and we've approved projects without any review or commenting by the water district, which had parking at 7-8 foot elevation, well below the flood levels for 800,000 square foot office development at 84 in Ardenwood. So there's a failure in planning. We were not included, the ACWD was not included in those design reviews. We should insist that we become included and take a more proactive role, because it's an inconvenient truth we should start paying attention to.
All right, with that, I'm going to open it up to our members of the public online, or those attending online. If you have any questions or comments for the board, please raise your hand in the Zoom app. Not seeing any hand, then I will say we are done with this item. Thank you very much. I know there are just 41 slides, but it's definitely a very heavy lift from everybody, so thank you.
All right, President Huang, we do have one general manager's report this evening, and it's another installment in the very long series of awards that go to our crack finance department and all the people that support them. So I'll ask our Director of Finance and Administration, Mr. Wunderlich, to share.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Last year, the district prepared its first ever popular annual financial report, which is a report designed to be a kind of summarized and more user-friendly version of our formal annual comprehensive financial report. The Government Finance Officers Association does have a recognition program for this report, which is based on reader appeal, understandability, distribution methods, and creativity. And I'm pleased to report that we met their criteria in each of those categories, and earlier this month were notified of recognition by GFOA. Just earlier today, we were notified by GFOA that we've received their Distinguished Budget Presentation Award again for our most recent 2-year budget adopted earlier this year. The award represents a significant achievement by the district. It reflects the commitment of the board and staff to meeting the highest principles of governmental budgeting. In order to receive the budget award, the district had to satisfy nationally recognized guidelines for effective budget presentation. These guidelines are designed to assess how well the district's budget serves as a policy document, a financial plan, an operations guide, and a communications device. And so obviously for something to serve as all of those things, it's really an effort of the entire district to put it together, but also reflects the board's interest as established through our initial strategic plan to promote financial transparency. And so I'm pleased to report that we've received these recognitions.
Congratulations.
That completes our general manager's reports for this evening.
All right, then let's move on to director's comments and or agenda item requests. Any director's comments, agenda item requests? Not seeing. Director Wee, yes, no?
Well, I, more or less a comment I made earlier, when we speak of the Bay Delta plan, please put in the date of 2035 so that you follow that. and when we do have other plans, to utilize a date for the planning. It gives us a concept of what we're doing.
Right, thank you. With that, no more comments, then I'll say the meeting is adjourned at 6:40.